My name is Eleanor Matthews and I can't take it anymore. For 15 years I've been silenced, belittled, and pushed into the shadows of my husband's family. They always saw me as the gold-digging second wife, the intruder who stole their precious Richard away. But when they laughed at me during his will reading, something inside me finally broke. They thought they'd won, that they'd finally pushed me out of the picture completely. But they didn't count on my son. They didn't expect those 7 words that changed everything in an instant. So go ahead, laugh now. Mock my tears. Because when this is over, every single one of you will regret the day you underestimated me. Before we continue, if you enjoy stories about justice and family drama, make sure to click that subscribe button. This is the best way for you to support our work. Thank you very much, and let's continue. I never thought I'd find love after 35. My first marriage had left me with nothing but scars, emotional and financial, and a fierce determination to never depend on anyone again. For 7 years I worked double shifts at the hospital, saving every penny I could while raising my son Alex on my own. He was my world, the only person I truly trusted. And watching him grow into a kind, thoughtful boy despite everything we'd been through filled me with a pride I can't describe. When I met Richard Matthews, I wasn't looking for romance. He came into the ER with a broken arm after a sailing accident, tall, distinguished, with silver-streaked dark hair and laugh lines around his eyes that hinted at a life well lived. At 52, he was 17 years my senior, but there was a gentleness to him that caught me off guard. He asked for my number before the cast was even dry. "I'm too old for games," he said simply. "And life's too short not to pursue what matters." I turned him down. Twice. But Richard was persistent in the most respectful way. It wasn't grand gestures. Just coffee dropped off during my long shifts, thoughtful conversations when we ran into each other, and a genuine interest in Alex when they eventually met. 6 months later, I finally agreed to a proper date. I'll never forget Alex's expression when I told him. He was 12 then, already protective of me in ways a child shouldn't have to be. "Are you sure, Mom?" he asked, his young face serious. "You always say we're doing fine on our own." "We are," I assured him. "This isn't about needing someone. It's about maybe wanting someone in our lives. There's a difference." I didn't tell Alex that I'd already looked into Richard's background. Old habits die hard, and my first husband had taught me caution. Richard Matthews was exactly who he presented himself to be: a successful architect with his own firm, a widower of 5 years, and father to 2 adult children. What I didn't know then was that his family came with complications money couldn't solve. Our romance moved slowly, deliberately. Richard never pushed, understanding my hesitation and respecting the boundaries I set. He won Alex over with genuine interest in his science projects and soccer games, never trying to replace the father who had walked out on us, but offering something new: stability, respect, and kindness. When Richard proposed a year later, it wasn't with a flashy diamond or grand gesture. We were painting Alex's room together, covered in blue speckles, when Richard suddenly put down his roller. "I love this," he said quietly. "The 3 of us, building a life. I want this forever, Eleanor. Will you marry me?" I remember looking at him, paint in his hair, sincerity in his eyes, and feeling something I thought I'd never feel again: safe. The wedding was small. Just us, Alex, a few close friends, and Richard's children, Michael and Catherine. They were in their 20s, perfectly polite, but with a chill I could feel across the room. Catherine barely smiled during the ceremony, while Michael scrutinized my every move. I tried to tell myself it was natural. They'd lost their mother, and seeing their father marry again must have been difficult. "Give them time," Richard whispered when he noticed my unease. "They'll see what I see in you." But time only seemed to deepen their resentment. Despite my attempts to connect with them, the wall remained. What hurt most was how differently they treated Alex. While never outright cruel, they made it clear that he wasn't really family, not a true Matthews. Behind closed doors, I heard Catherine refer to us as Richard's charity project. Richard tried to mediate, but his efforts often made things worse. The more he defended us, the more his children seemed to blame me for creating division. Family dinners became battlegrounds of passive-aggressive comments and tense silences, with Richard's mother, Vivian, often leading the charge. Vivian Matthews was a force of nature, 75 years old with the energy of someone half her age, and the sharp tongue of someone who'd never been told no in her life. She lived in the family's ancestral home, a sprawling Victorian on the edge of town that had been in the Matthews family for generations.
"You've done well for yourself,"
She said to me the first time we met.
her eyes sweeping over me in assessment.
A nurse, Richard tells me.
How practical. The way she said practical made it sound like a fatal character flaw.
Mom, Richard warned, but Vivian just smiled, all teeth and no warmth. I'm simply getting to know my new daughter-in-law.
Isn't that what you wanted?
For Richard's sake, I endured the weekly family dinners at Vivian's house, where I was invariably seated at the far end of the table,
Away from Richard, while Michael and Catherine flanked their grandmother like courtiers.
They spoke of family history and shared memories, rarely bothering to provide context.
Effectively excluding Alex and me from the conversation. "We should stip next week,"
I suggested once after a particularly exhausting evening.
"Maybe some distance would help."
Richard looked pained. Family is everything to my mother.
"If we stop coming, she'll only blame you more."
And if we keep going, nothing changes except my sanity. I countered, but in the end I relented. Because that's what you do when you love someone.
You make compromises, even when they hurt.
For all the tension with his family, my life with Richard was everything I could have hoped for. He formally adopted Alex 2 years into our marriage.
Something my son had nervously asked for himself. "I want to be a Matthews too,"
Alex had said, and Richard had hugged him so tightly, tears in his eyes. You already are in every way that matters, he'd answered. But I'd be honored to make it official. The legal adoption infuriated Vivian, Michael, and Catherine. The implication was clear: Alex would inherit equally with Richard's biological children. The Cold War escalated to open hostility, with Catherine confronting me directly at one family dinner.
"You think you're so clever,"
she hissed when Richard stepped out of the room. "Securing your son's future with our family money."
I met her gaze steadily. Alex wanted Richard as his father.
The adoption was about family, not finances. Something you might understand if you gave us a chance. We know exactly what kind of woman you are, Michael chimed in. Dad may be blinded, but we see you clearly.
What they didn't see, refused to see,
was how happy Richard and I were together.
How our home was filled with laughter and simple contentment.
We traveled modestly, worked hard, and built a life centered around making our blended family work. Even if half of that family wanted nothing to do with us.
In our 10th year of marriage, everything changed.
Richard began forgetting things. Small at first, like where he'd put his keys or appointments he'd made.
I noticed before anyone else.
Cataloging the symptoms with the clinical part of my brain,
while my heart refused to acknowledge what was happening. The diagnosis came 3 months later. Early onset Alzheimer's. At 62,
Richard faced a future of rapid decline. I took a leave of absence from work to care for him.
A decision his family immediately criticized. "Convenient that you're stepping away right as he needs proper care,"
Vivian remarked acidly. I suppose the hospital doesn't pay as well as being a full-time wife to a wealthy man.
I swallowed my retort, focusing instead on Richard's care plan.
When Catherine suggested a full-time nurse instead of burdening me, I simply responded,
"This isn't a burden. This is my husband."
The truth that his family refused to see was that our modest lifestyle meant Richard wasn't nearly as wealthy as they believed. His firm had been successful.
Yes.
But he'd always believed in fair pay for his employees and ethical business practices over profit. The extensive care he would need would strain our finances significantly, especially with me no longer working. But Alex, now in college on a partial scholarship, immediately offered to leave school to help. No, I told him firmly. Your education is non-negotiable. We'll figure this out. And we did. I became Richard's caregiver, learning to navigate the progressively difficult terrain of Alzheimer's. I documented everything: his good days, his favorites foods, the memories he clung to the longest, creating a roadmap for when words failed him. In the evenings, I researched clinical trials and support groups, fighting exhaustion to find anything that might slow his decline. Michael and Catherine visited rarely, uncomfortable with their father's deterioration.
When they did come,
they criticized everything from the music I played for Richard to the arrangement of the furniture, insisting they knew better what their father would want.
"He always hated jazz,"
Catherine claimed. switching off the Duke Ellington record that had Richard tapping his fingers contentedly.
That was before me.
I explained gently. We saw Ellington's orchestra 5 years ago for our anniversary.
It became our thing.
Well, I've known him my entire life, she snapped. Not just the last decade. These visits inevitably left Richard agitated and confused, especially as his disease progressed. Eventually, it limited them to times when he was most lucid, a decision that Vivian called elder abuse to anyone who would listen. Through it all, Alex remained our rock. He came home every weekend from college, somehow managing to maintain his grades while helping care for the man who had chosen to be his father. He had a gift for reaching Richard even on his worst days, pulling him back to us with patience and understanding beyond his years.
In our 15th year of marriage.
Richard no longer recognized his children most days.
But he still knew me.
Still reached for my hand in the darkness when nightmares plagued him. Still murmured, Eleanor, like a prayer.
The end came suddenly.
A massive stroke in the night. I woke to his labored breathing, called the ambulance, rode with him to the hospital.
My hand never leaving his. In his final moments of consciousness, his eyes found mine with perfect clarity. Best decision I ever made, he whispered. You and Alex.
My real legacy.
He was gone before morning, and I was left with a hole in my heart.
And a family that hated me more than ever. The funeral was a choreographed battle for position. Vivian arranged everything without consulting me, placing Michael and Catherine in the front row while relegating Alex and me to the second. When I objected, she simply said, Blood family comes first, Eleanor. Surely you understand.
I chose not to make a scene, not there. Not with Richard's body lying between us. But when the family lawyer, Hamilton Pierce, approached me after the service to schedule the will reading, Vivian intercepted him. We'll be handling that at the family home, as is tradition, she announced. Friday at 3. Hamilton looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Matthews, as Richard's widow, Eleanor Shedd. Friday at 3 is fine, I interrupted, too exhausted for another confrontation. We'll be there. The Matthews family home had never felt welcoming. But that Friday,
it felt positively hostile.
Alex drove us there,
parking his beaten-up college car between Catherine's Mercedes and Michael's BMW. We don't have to do this today, he said, studying my face. At 27, he'd grown into a thoughtful man with Richard's sense of ethics and a protective streak toward me that sometimes broke my heart.
Hamilton could meet us separately. No,
I said, straightening my shoulders. Richard would want us to face this with dignity. Inside, the family had assembled like a tribunal. Vivian sat at the head of the dining table, flanked by Michael, Catherine, and a few distant relatives who had rarely bothered with Richard during his illness, but had materialized for the reading. 2 empty chairs waited at the far end for Alex and me. Hamilton Pierce looked distinctly uncomfortable as he laid his briefcase on the table. A slight man with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetual furrow between his brows. He'd been Richard's friend, as well as his lawyer, for over 30 years.
Shall we begin?
He asked, his eyes darting between Vivian and me.
Please,
Vivian said with a dismissive wave. Some of us have actual commitments this evening.
I felt Alex tense beside me,
but laid a hand on his arm.
Not now, my touch said. Let's just get through this.
Hamilton cleared his throat. This is the last will and testament of Richard James Matthews, revised and signed 3 years ago. 3 years ago, when Richard still had most of his faculties, when he understood exactly what he was doing.
A small comfort.
The beginning was standard. Revocation of previous wills, appointment of executors. I half listened, my mind filled with memories of Richard. Not the shell he'd become in his final months, but the man who'd painted rooms with me, who'd taught Alex to drive, who'd held my hand through every hardship. I was jolted back to attention when Hamilton said,
Regarding the distribution of my assets. Vivian leaned forward, her posture almost predatory.
Michael and Catherine exchanged glances across the table. To my mother, Vivian Matthews, I leave the sum of $50,000 with my deepest gratitude for her strength and guidance throughout my life. Vivian's face remained impassive, though I knew she had expected to retain control of the family finances as she had since Richard's father died. To my son Michael, I leave my collection of architectural books and drawings, my gold watch,
And the sum of $200,000. Michael blinked rapidly, his expression confused.
He had been working at his father's firm for years,
Clearly expecting to inherit the business.
To my daughter Catherine, I leave my mother's jewelry collection, currently in the family safe, my summer cottage in Maine.
And the sum of $200,000.
Catherine's face flushed red. The cottage was valuable but not nearly what she'd anticipated.
Hamilton continued without pausing, though the tension in the room had become palpable.
To my wife Eleanor, I leave our primary residence, its contents and 51% ownership of Matthew's architectural design.
The silence that followed was absolute.
Then Michael stood,
his chair screeching against the hardwood floor. That's impossible,
he sputtered.
Dad would never leave the firm to her.
She knows nothing about architecture.
Hamilton held up a hand. If you'll allow me to finish, Michael.
But Michael wasn't listening.
His face contorted with rage as he pointed at me. What did you do?
How did you manipulate him into this?
He was sick, he wasn't thinking clearly. Michael.
Hamilton snapped with unexpected authority.
Sit down. Now.
Surprisingly, Michael complied.
Though his glare could have melted steel.
The will continues, Hamilton said, adjusting his glasses. I appoint my wife, Eleanor Matthews, as the controlling partner of Matthews Architectural Design with the expectation that she will oversee the company's ethical direction, while leaving day-to-day operations to the current management team. This arrangement will continue until my son, Alex Matthews, completes his architectural studies, at which point ownership will transfer to him in full, should he desire it.
The room erupted.
Catherine was on her feet now, shouting about blood family
and gold-digging nurses.
Vivian's face had gone ash-gray, her fingers clutching the edge of the table.
And Michael looked at me with such hatred that I instinctively moved closer to Alex.
This is fraud, Michael hissed.
We'll contest it. All of it. Beside me, Alex stood slowly, his face calm but his eyes blazing with a quiet fury I'd rarely seen. Dad always said you never listened,
he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. The room fell quiet, all eyes turning to my son. You never knew he helped me change my major to architecture last year. You never visited enough to see how he spent hours teaching me everything he knew.
Even when words failed him.
You never cared that his greatest fear wasn't death. It was that the firm he built would lose its soul to profit margins and cutting corners. Alex looked each family member in the eye one by one. You never really knew him at all. Catherine let out a harsh laugh,
breaking the spell of Alex's words.
How convenient that he decided to make his son his successor.
Tell me, Eleanor, how long did you plan this?
Was it before or after you realized how sick he was? The laughter that followed from Catherine, from Michael, even from Vivian cut deep. It wasn't just mockery. It was the final dismissal of everything Richard and I had built together. Of the love that had sustained us through his illness. Of the family we had created against all odds.
But before I could respond, Alex spoke again.
7 simple words that stopped the laughter instantly.
I have his journals. All 15 years' worth. The silence that followed was deafening. What journals?
Vivian finally asked, her voice suddenly uncertain. Alex reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a leather-bound book. Dad started keeping journals the day he met Mom. When his memory began to fail,
he wrote everything down.
His thoughts, his plans, his conversations with each of you. He opened the journal to a marked page. Like this entry from after Michael suggested cutting materials quality to increase profits. My son sees the firm as nothing but a cash machine. Today he argued for compromising structural integrity to save money. Eleanor was the only one who understood my horror. How can I leave my life's work to someone who would put financial gain over people's safety? Michael's face drained of color. Alex flipped to another page. Catherine visited today, the first time in months.
She spent the entire time on her phone.
Then asked about her inheritance before leaving. Eleanor sat with me for hours afterward as I grieved the daughter I thought I'd raised. Catherine looked away, her expression a mixture of anger and shame. Or this one, Alex continued relentlessly.
Mother continues to undermine Eleanor at every turn, refusing to see how she sacrificed everything to care for me.
Today she suggested we put me somewhere appropriate,
so Eleanor could get on with finding her next husband.
The cruelty in her voice when she speaks to the woman I love breaks what's left of my heart. Vivian's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass.
There are hundreds of entries like these,
Alex said, returning the journal to his bag. Dad documented everything, including the day he decided to change his will, fully lucid and with his doctor present to verify his capacity.
He knew exactly what he was doing. He looked at me then, and the pride in his eyes brought tears to mine.
Turning back to the stunned family, he continued,
You can contest the will if you want, but these journals will be submitted as evidence, and every ugly word you ever said,
every time you disrespected my mother, every scheme you planned while he was dying, all as it will become public record.
No one spoke. Hamilton Pierce cleared his throat.
There is one final provision in the will, he said quietly.
To my children Michael and Catherine, I leave this final thought.
Family is not merely blood.
It is seeing the best in each other, it is forgiveness, it is love that perseveres.
Eleanor and Alex showed me what family truly means.
I hope someday you will understand that before it's too late.
The room remained silent as Hamilton gathered his papers.
Unless there are questions about the technical aspects of the will, I believe we're finished here. Michael and Catherine exchanged glances, a wordless communication passing between them. Without another word, they stood and left the room.
The front door slamming behind them moments later. Vivian remained, her earlier confidence now replaced with something like uncertainty. Those journals, she finally said. Richard really wrote all that?
Alex nodded. Every word.
She looked at me then, really looked at me perhaps for the first time. You did care for him, she said, not quite a question. With everything I had, I replied simply. Vivian nodded once, then stood with as much dignity as she could muster. I'll be staying with my sister for a while, she announced to no one in particular,
and followed her grandchildren out.
When we were alone, Hamilton's professional demeanor softened. Richard knew this would be difficult, he said gently.
But he was very clear about his wishes.
The firm is yours now, Eleanor. Though I'd be happy to help you navigate the transition.
I thanked him, but my mind was elsewhere. As soon as he left, I turned to Alex, overwhelmed with a mixture of pride and sadness.
You never told me about the journals, I said. Dad asked me to keep them safe, he explained. He knew they might be needed someday, but he hoped they wouldn't be.
He wanted the family to stay together,
I realized.
Alex nodded. But not at any cost. Not at the expense of what was right.
He took my hand. What do you want to do about the firm? I know architecture wasn't exactly in your life plan. I thought about it, about Richard's faith in me, about the legacy he wanted to preserve. I think, I said slowly,
that we honor his wishes. I'll oversee the ethics and mission while you finish your degree.
Then we'll decide together. 2 weeks later, I walked into Matthew's architectural design for the first time as its majority owner. The employees greeted me with cautious respect. Many had known and loved Richard, but few knew what to make of me. I didn't try to prove myself immediately or make sweeping changes.
Instead, I listened.
I learned. I asked questions about ongoing projects and company culture. I reviewed Richard's original mission statement
and made it prominently visible in the lobby.
Michael didn't return to the firm, choosing instead to start his own practice across town. Catherine left for Europe shortly after the will reading,
her relationship with the family seemingly severed.
And Vivian surprised us all by reaching out 6 months later.
I'd like to see Richard's grave,
she said stiffly over the phone.
And perhaps we could have tea afterward. It wasn't an apology, but it was a beginning.
The journals remained private, as Richard would have wanted. Alex graduated the following year with honors in architecture, stepping into the firm with both innovation and respect for his father's vision. Together, we expanded the company's focus on sustainable design and ethical business practices, securing its reputation as one of the most principled firms in the region. 3 years after Richard's death,
I received an unexpected package.
Inside was Catherine's portion of her mother's jewelry collection and a brief note.
These should stay in the family.
Alex might want them someday.
And doing well in Paris. Tay.
It wasn't forgiveness exactly,
but it was acknowledgement.
Of Alex's family, of the future Richard had envisioned. On the 5th anniversary of Richard's death, I visited his grave alone.
Something I did every month.
But with special intention on this day.
The polished granite was simple, elegant.
just as he would have wanted.
You would be proud of him.
I said softly, tracing Richard's name with my fingers.
Alex has your eye for beauty and your heart for people.
The firm is thriving, ethically and financially. We haven't compromised once.
I place fresh flowers beside the headstone.
Michael's work is getting recognition now. Different from yours, more modern but solid. Catherine sent a Christmas card last year.
Just a card, no note, but it's something. And your mother?
She's trying, Richard.
We have lunch once a month.
Mostly we talk about you.
But sometimes we talk about other things too.
Real things.
The wind picked up.
Rustling the leaves of the oak tree that shaded his grave. For a moment,
I could almost feel his presence.
Not as the man ravaged by disease in his final years,
but as the one who had painted rooms with me, who had chosen love over convention,
who had built a family from brokenness.
Best decision I ever made,
I whispered, echoing his last words to me.
You and Alex.
My real legacy.
I stood,
brushing grass from my knees, and walked toward the future Richard had made possible. A future where family wasn't defined by blood or money, but by the courage to stand together when it mattered most.
In the end, it wasn't the will that changed everything.
It wasn't even those 7 words from Alex that silenced the mockery. It was Richard's quiet belief that love perseveres, that true family rises above pettiness and greed, and that sometimes the most powerful legacy we leave is the example of how we loved.
As I reached my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Alex.
Meeting went well. Board approved the scholarship program in Dad's name. We did it, Mom.
I smiled through my tears. Yes, we had.
And somewhere Richard was smiling too.